Good morning, this is Judy LaRock for Flowers, Veggies, and Other Things, and I'm here today to talk to you about making your own planters. This is made out of Heifer tufa, and I'm going to show you how to mix it together, how to put it in the containers, and how to make some great planters. These were made in a workshop that we did at the Sandwich Gardeners last fall. This is a wonderful project for spring and fall when it's cool. You can work outside. This is an outside event. You can't do this, you don't want to be doing this in the house. This is a sloppy event. But it's great to do it early spring or fall because they need to cure a little bit before you use them as planters. But you can make them all different sizes. This one was made out of a basket that sort of overlapped each other. It has some great texture to it. This is a larger basket. Fabulous texture. The one thing you have to remember though, when you use baskets or anything else as a mold, it cannot be reused for anything. You're going to be tearing it off. So make sure that you're using ones that you can dispose of, that you don't need anymore, no matter what your mold is. Okay? The recipe is, I'm going to give it to you in parts because it depends on how much you need. Maybe you only need a few to make one or two. Maybe you want to make a whole bunch for a group. It's 1 part Portland cement to 1.5 parts of peat moss and 1.5 parts of perlite. Perlite's those little white things that you see in the potting mixture and things. That's very light, very durable. It can stay out all winter, no problem. You can add a little bit of sphagnum moss if you want a little texture or something to it, but none of that is necessary. Some people do like to add a little cement coloration to it, the dye. I kind of like it, the natural look, okay? But be a little bit out of the box on your molds. This one came from a Stop and Shop cake. This is the cover that goes on the Stop and Shop cake, the plastic covers. They turn out phenomenal with this on here. Little tiny baskets. This would be so sweet with just 1 or 2 little hens and chicks in it on a patio or something, so you don't have to have a big yard to do this. Okay? I have one here before we start mixing so you can see it that I've started to put together with some plants in it. But just because I have these succulents in it, this is one that would work phenomenally in a hot, dry, sunny spot. But if you have all oak trees in your backyard, think ferns, think baby hostas, those little tiny 6-inch hostas, they would be really sweet in here. If you had one this size on a deck, you could do herbs in it. It doesn't have to be succulents, but this is what we're doing with this one here. A little drape is always nice. A little height, round, different shapes, look wonderful in it. You can use the leftover that we have, and we make little objects, and you can put them in there just to add. If you have, as most of us do on Cape Cod, a collection of seashells, those can go in, cover bare spots when they're brand new, add a little texture. I know a friend of mine who makes these, and their grandchildren collect, when they come up, collect little stones from the beach every time, and she puts a couple of them in her planters as remembrances. So these should be individual. These are your special homemade planters, and use your imagination in what you use for product as well as to fill. Now this over here, we made up a batch. It's in an old beer barrel, and as I said, it has cement in it, so you want to use gloves because cement can really dry out your hands. Okay. So if you don't have, you need some kind of gloves, even if they're not these, just the old ones you can get at the hardware store are just great. Okay. You mix it up real well. Keep putting it in until it is, as with any other recipe, whether you're making a cake, whether you're making anything, you want it to have a texture. Okay. If you need a little bit more water, a little bit more peat moss, just so that you get the mixture that holds together like this. If you do this and the water runs out, add a little bit more of the dry ingredients. If it just crumbles and falls apart and it just won't hold together, a little bit more water. Okay, but basically that's the ingredients. Okay. The one thing you want to remember with this is, I'm going to put this part in here. I put the base in already in this one. You want a good inch. If you notice with all of these, they're at least an inch. Some of them, you might say, oh, this is a little too thick. Better to err on the too thick than the too thin. If you're taking your basket off, the plastic, and if part chips off, it just adds to the texture. But if it's too thin and you start to take it off, the wall will collapse, and that's disaster. So you want it to be at least an inch thick all the way around. Start with the bottom, and then you start working up the sides all the way around, making sure that it's attached to the bottom. Just mold it in. It's very much like using molding clay. Okay. And you just keep adding it. You'll notice here I put plastic on the liner. Not a necessity, but it sure helps. Because if you're trying to take these off, especially something like this, you're going to spend half your afternoon pulling the pieces of the basket or plastic out of the mold. So this helps. It also adds texture. All the texture in this one here is just the plastic that was on the plastic. So you don't have to be real neat with it. Put it in there, the little curves and the overlaps will add texture to your product. Just keep working your way around until you have a finished one. Now when this is done, it has to sit in the mold for at least a week, week and a half, it can be 2 weeks, to dry before you touch it. You bring it home, put it in a shed, downstairs in the back of the basement, somewhere, leave it alone for a couple weeks, and then gently turn it over and knock it out. Pull the plastic off if you can. If you can't, leave it be. Give it another week or so to dry out, and then continue to pull the plastic off. And you'll eventually get done. This one was done a little bit, maybe a couple months before. This one, who hasn't already dried out, this has only been done about a month or so ago, and it's still in the process of drying out. So it's a little darker. Okay. It will eventually get down if you don't use any coloring to these colors here. That's the normal color. So you keep working your way around until the whole thing is done. And you want to use every little bit of your mixture, and you become very creative when you have a little bit left over. And we found some Coke bottles one time and cut the bottoms off and made these wonderful little shapes that can also fit in as decorations in some of the big ones. You can make, the sky's the limit with the mold, as long as you can get it off. That's the most important thing. So almost finished with this one. There we go, almost finished. It's a little, this is all molded together, and some people make fancy tops. It will be finished like this, and it will sit for at least a couple weeks. Now if you do these in April and it's warmer outside, they'll probably dry out a lot quicker in my shed than they will now. But now they'll sit most of the winter out there. I'll probably go out around Christmas time on a nice day and knock them out of their mold, and then they'll sit there for a while. If you want to get very creative when you knock them out of the mold, if you have a wire brush, this one was plain, like this here, plain sides. And when the woman who made this took it out, she used a really strong metal brush. Those ones you clean the grill with, that real good one. And she just dug into the sides to give it this wonderful wooden texture. To me, it almost looks like wood or real stone. Little bits like this that got stuck in here, a big hunk of peat moss or something, just adds texture. This is such an organic product that anything that goes into it that has something that just adds value to the product. It's a wonderful thing. Again, imagination, plastic top to the cake from the Stop and Shop. Who knew that would turn into something this beautiful? Okay. So usually, if you're using baskets, we cut the handles off these. Makes it easier to work with. Difficult to do anything that has handles like that. That makes it hard to work with, trying to mold something up and around. But this will add this wonderful texture of the basket to it, and it will end up having a texture similar to this one here, I think. Now, again, to repeat, you start with the bottom, inch thick all the way around, and then you work up onto the sides and judge at the end when you think it's done. When you get to the point that you have it like this, you want to make your hole in the bottom. I make mine with my finger, and I go all the way through, and it goes down, because especially if you can put herbs or succulents or anything like that in here, you really have to have this hole. Occasionally when it's drying, the bottom might seal up a little. It's very important to keep that open at all times. It's also a wonderful way to judge. Say, as I did with this one here, that's an inch thick, and you know it's an inch thick when you test your hole. Some people have special tools they use, little rods and things. I'm a real gardener. I'm a hands-on person, and I like to just make my holes. so there they are. But the drainage holes are very important. The bigger the pot, the more drainage holes. This one, as you can see, she tried to make 3 and 2 stayed. That should do it okay. I would have liked to have seen all 3 in there, but the 2 will do okay. This would be much too big a planter for just one little hole. That's a judgment thing. It's kind of like, when is the cake done? Okay. So put your bottom in, make sure you have your drainage hole, and then work up on your tops. It's done. Okay. I thank you very much for coming, and I hope you have a wonderful time making your hypertubers. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye. Hi, this is Judy LaRocque, and welcome to FBOC. And I am here today to talk about seeds. You get to about the middle of February and the entire world wants to start seeds. We all have to get out into the garden and touch some dirt. I'm here to encourage and to discourage the use of the seed trays and the seed racks. Okay. The most important thing about having your things for seeds is, do you have a place to grow them? How much room do you have to grow them? And how much time are you willing to put into it? Okay. Today, just for time, we're going to talk only about vegetable seeds. Okay. There's tons of information out there. Wonderful books that will tell you how to start your vegetables, how to grow them. Books that are just strictly for seeds, propagation books, all these things, all of which are fantastic. Great, I call them great winter reading, great reference books, things you can use. But if you are really just looking to grow a specific seed, if you get the seed packet, almost everything you need to know about growing that particular seed is most likely somewhere on the seed packet. The most important things you have to remember about any seeds is, when do you plant them? How long does it take for them to germinate? How long does it take before it becomes a big enough plant to go outside. This is assuming you're starting inside. And when does that plant want to go outside? So often we start our seeds in February that for something like a green bean that doesn't want to be out until June. And the plant's huge and leggy in April, and it doesn't want to be out for a couple more months. So the back of the seed pod will tell you how long that plant needs to go from germination to where it's a little plant, when it will go outside, and when it will be used. The other thing to remember about growing seeds is there's a limited amount of sun most likely in your house. If you have a sunny window, or if you have those wonderful light arrays, that's great. The fluorescent light works wonderful. They don't have to be fancy grow lights, just the fluorescence will be great. But you have usually enough space under those grow lights for 2 or 3 of these types of trays. Keep these trays for things that really do well from seed. Ones that you could put right into the garden, or that you don't need that many of by plants, or seeds that could go right in the ground. Example, green beans. Green beans never have to be started in the house. They can be started outside, and they can be started 3 times during the growing season. Once the beginning of June, once the 1st of July, once the end of July, and you will have 3 or 4 plants blooming and producing beans all summer long. No reason to start them inside. They're great outside. Sunflowers, another wonderful example. Other things that you really have to be careful of, things like squash. I had a teacher one time that used to say, you know when you're growing too many zucchini plants, when your neighbors take up jogging, when they're running away from you every time they see you for fear that you're going to be giving them more zucchini plants. Sometimes there's some things you want to grow 2 of. That's what you get plants from. Okay, go get to the nursery, buy 2 zucchini, 2 butternut squash, 2 summer squash. It's better variety, and it's wonderful. But if you are starting seed, start with clean trays. Know exactly how big an area you're going to need, and choose your seeds wisely. Plant them the depth that they're supposed to. Some seeds only want to be right on the top of the soil. Others, they'll say 1/4 inch down, some 1/2 inch down, and they're really serious. If you dig down real deep and try to save that seed and cover it down, it needs light to germinate. It won't. You'll be disappointed. Nothing will germinate. Time of germination. Though I was basically going to talk about vegetables. Impatiens is the best example of that one. Impatiens take close to 2 months for the seed to actually germinate. Unless it's your hobby, I can see no reason to start those in your house because you're going to have nothing for 2 months. Okay. Great one. So lettuce is a wonderful one to start from seed. Starting lettuce in February is just a wonderful, wonderful example of intelligence in seed starting. You start those little seeds a little red, a little green, and you start them in February. They're ready to go out in April when it's nice and cool. That's when the lettuce wants to be out there, and that they would work wonderful. Spinach is another one for those early plantings that would do beautifully, starting them inside in the winter time. They'll be small little leaves by the beginning of April, and they'll flourish outside in the cold. At the same time of year, peas are an example of a plant that you just put right outside in the planter or in the ground. Those don't have to be started inside. They'll do just great. Start those. My rule is always, it's a good winter if I can get the peas in the ground on St. Patrick's Day. They're one of the earliest ones to go out. So if you can get those peas in on St. Patrick's Day, the lettuce in by the middle of April, you have a wonderful start to your vegetable garden. And those 2 will work well. Okay? All right, thanks very much, and we'll talk more about seeds at another time. Bye-bye.